Reiki Currents, a Reiki News LIVE Talkshow, bringing you interviews with Reiki wisdom holders and stories of hope and healing from around the world. I'm Stephen Vandiver, your host. The focus on Reiki is to spotlight one of the world's fastest growing self-care, spiritual, and personal development tools. Everyone can learn this calming, relaxing, and healing technique and channel universal life force energy. As we come to know that our universe and everything around us, including our physical bodies, is made entirely of energy, learning to effectively work with this energy is key. Reiki is a priceless addition to your personal spiritual development toolbox. Our guest tonight is Elise Brenner, PhD, owner of Brenner Reiki Healing in the Boston area, Reiki practitioner, teacher, founder and executive director of the nonprofit Reiki educational organization, the Celebration of Reiki, Inc., trained in Usui Reiki Ryoho and a registered Reiki practitioner with the Shibumi Reiki Association. Dr. Brenner empowers individuals of all ages and backgrounds on their journey towards health and wellness. Good evening, Elise. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm so thankful to be here.
Absolutely. I'd love to start, with your journey to Reiki. How did it all start for you?
I always say the last person anyone would expect to be a Reiki practitioner. I'm a more scientific and skeptical person, not a cynic, but a skeptic. So I'm open and curious, but skeptical. And about 15 years ago, I had what might be called a spiritual experience. And that, of course, the first thing I said to myself when I had this experience was, oh, things like this don't happen to people like me. But it did. And following that, I had a series of coincidences regarding Reiki. So I followed those coincidences and signed up for my first Reiki training class. And it was incredibly helpful. I have a pretty earthy relationship with Reiki, and that has continued to this day. So, one of my mottos can really be skeptics welcome, because I was the biggest one.
There you go. So, talk a little bit about that. How did science, create this skeptic about Reiki, in yourself?
So my approach to Reiki is to see it on many levels. Mm-hmm. One is the science behind Reiki practice and the benefits of Reiki, such as allowing a shift of the nervous system from sympathetic to parasympathetic, so the entire, all the organs of the body, all the systems of the body can operate optimally. So there's really not a lot of mystery there. Mm-hmm. And when I speak and do outreach, I think people really can understand that they are able to, with self-Reiki, with Hara breathing, that they can begin to self-regulate. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we don't have a lot of tools for emotional regulation. Mm-hmm. So I do like speaking in those terms. Mm-hmm. It's more the biology and the physiology, and bringing all the systems of our body in an optimal state for healing. Mm-hmm.
Now,
did that help?
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. So you talk about emotional healing. Can you talk a bit about, maybe some of the emotional healing that you were working with, or some of the physical benefits that you received when you started receiving Reiki?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, well before I was drawn to Reiki, I had a vestibular disorder, which for all of you who know what that is, I'm sorry you know what it is, because that might mean you've experienced it. It's vertigo, it's dizziness, there's different causes and different manifestations, but for everyone it's extremely uncomfortable, kind of an invisible illness because it's hard for other people to understand it. And the vestibular system is here in the inner ear. And doing self-Reiki, I spent plenty of time with my hands there. And weeks, and then a month, and then 2 months went by. And, Steve, I didn't have a vestibular episode. And actually, I've pretty much not had one ever since, and it's been about 15 years. I continue to practice that self-Reiki, of course. So things that Western medicine couldn't quite address effectively, Reiki worked very well for me. I did have you know how you have like the angel and the devil in those cartoons, those little bubbles? So it had like the scientific me and the newly trained Reiki practitioner, and the scientific skeptical would be, how can it be possible that this Reiki practice is helping? And then the Reiki person inside me said, well, it does seem. So I have to say the direct experience suggests that this was effective. And as a matter of fact, I talked myself into reaching out to a vestibular disorder support group and seeing if they wanted me to speak about this. And lo and behold, they did. And they invited me twice. And I was able to help some other people as well. And I continue to help and serve people with vestibular disorders. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, is that okay? Can I go on about
Please.
Physical? Beyond that, and it may be part of a syndrome, I don't know, but I would have occasionally migraines, or at least your everyday headaches that other people have, catch colds like other people have, and Reiki has worked very well for me in that I haven't really had headaches or colds for like maybe over a decade, which is fantastic. I don't go yelling it from the hillside because it would seem a little far-fetched, but in my quiet way, I like to bring across the benefits on a physical level.
Very nice.
And I know you had asked about the emotional level, and, you know, I have to say that is one of those wonderful benefits that bypasses the cognitive process. So one day you're speaking more kindly. You're looking at people with eyes of love and non-judgment in a way that you maybe didn't. Hope I'm not alone in that prior. And that's emotionally very freeing. That allows you to feel, you know, how to have an interaction with everything and everyone around you in a more open way. That's probably the greatest gift for me. Mm-hmm. That's the life-changing part for me. Mm. That to have an interaction, to be able to feel a relationship with all beings and nature and animals and plants and everybody. So I don't think that necessarily is magic. I think that is the benefits of the practice. Yeah.
Beautiful. And with this vestibular support group that you had joined, was that the start of the outreach that you began doing?
I guess you could say it was. I am very committed now to bringing Reiki practice to populations that may be well served by Reiki or maybe underserved by Reiki. And I hadn't, you know, that's interesting, Steve, because I hadn't seen it that way. But yes, many years ago, that would have been my first outreach. Yeah, and it so happens that support group was not too far from me. It was located in a nearby hospital, and I didn't even know about it. Yeah, there it was. And quite a nice group, too. So I have continued with Reiki outreach to this day. Is that something that people would like to hear about?
Absolutely.
So my own teacher has taught me to be very generous with Reiki teachings and practices, etc. And so I may go with colleagues or not with colleagues to, let's say, a psychosocial support group for people with cancer. And we find out what they want for their experience. They might want to sit in hara breathing and Joshin Kokyu Ho, Reiki meditation. They might want to lie on tables and get, 30-minute treatments. They might want to bring themselves to engage with the precepts. They don't have to be trained and certified to do that. So usually following a presentation, a 45-minute to an hour and a half presentation about Reiki, we discuss with the social worker, the activities director, whoever is in charge, we would like to offer, or I would like to offer Reiki services ongoing here. Let's see what shape that might take. And so some of these things I mentioned just a moment ago about, do people want to lie on a table and have a session? Do people want to have an experiential meditation, engage with the precepts? We go with the flow, and I've done all of those by myself and also with colleagues in collaboration.
How do you facilitate that? If you have a group of people and everybody wants, to experience something a little different, are you working with them one-on-one?
No, so the group would have come up with a way they'd like to proceed. Yeah. No, some people in that group may choose to say, gee, this is very meaningful to me. I would really like to take, a 10 or whatever hour Reiki level 1 training class and be able to care for myself and others and learn the whole thing. And so then we can do that I could do that, for example, in my own Reiki training classes, or I can do it with a group there. So there was an low-income elderly housing facility, and I went there and did 5 hours plus 5 hours for a Reiki 1 training at their facility. Yeah, that was wonderful. That was wonderful. And they are, practicing Reiki. And if they ever want to have their own Reiki share, for example, there's enough of them that they can do that. Yeah, so I guess the goal is that everyone becomes self-sufficient in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about, serving underserved communities. Can you talk a little bit about that, what that looks like?
It looks the same, pretty much, as the way I've described things. It's just it's more helpful to have a contact. So, for example, if I'm going into a community of color, I'm white. And it might help if I have somebody that can say I'm okay. So currently, similarly, I'm not elderly yet. Who am I to people in their 80s? It might be nice if an activities director or a social worker will kind of say, I'd like to bring you in, and I will introduce you and set the stage so that it's welcoming and everyone feels welcome. Me with them. I think to be an ally to people who maybe don't look like me means that I have to take risks just like they take risks just by being who they are, living in this society every day. So I think it might require that to really be an ally.
There we go. Now, one of the things our viewers like to, understand and learn is the conversation that is effective when talking to maybe a director of a facility versus the conversation about Reiki with, someone that wants to experience Reiki.
Great question. People have pioneered this before me. For example, Pamela Miles in New York City talks a lot about speaking credibly about Reiki, and I have learned a lot from her. And then I've kind of found my own way as well. I just try to make it very real. For example, I'll say things like, many of us are living our lives waiting for the next shoe to drop. Reiki can help us navigate through that. even if it just means getting through some really painful moments, right? It doesn't mean where I'm fully recovered, everything's great. No, even amidst the suffering, amidst the uncertainty, we can trust ourselves not to fall apart. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as that. So I try to, make it real. Make it real. So we all can understand pain and suffering. We can all understand living with uncertainty. We can understand that brings out fear. And then fear and anger and worry, is separation. We all feel separated and isolated. So being honest and saying, this is the way we are, and Reiki can help us navigate through that, assist us, guide us, strengthen us, support us, give us encouragement and reassurance. And also don't forget to reach out to other people. I mean, there's many ways to, as a wonderful colleague of mine says, reach toward wellness. There's many ways. And Reiki is certainly the go-to one for me. And so sharing that with others is just really natural as well. Like I say, try to make it real. Yeah. Did that?
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. Can you talk a little bit about social justice?
So, partly because of teaching at the college level, I teach, as we talked, a course called Health, Illness, and Society. And in a course like that, we're talking a lot about the social determinants of health, the lack of health equity, the lack of social justice, and kind of everything comes down to health. Transportation is health. Housing is health. Your neighborhood is health. Everything comes down to health. And if there is lack of equity and lack of justice, then the level of suffering is ever more deeper and often intergenerational. And it is, you might call it, like Paul Farmer, that crew calls it structural violence. So people are not only living their lives with a certain level of uncertainty, they're living their lives in systems of oppression. So I'm still feeling my way through how Reiki practice can be beneficial. And I think it's beneficial in a couple of ways. And please, all of the listeners, I'm still working my way through this, and I invite all of your input. But as a tradition of wisdom and compassion, I think Reiki does have something to say about social justice by simply being a system of wisdom and compassion. Secondly, Reiki strengthens each of us to stay stable and solid so that we can do tough work. We can recognize tough things about ourselves, whether they're explicit or implicit biases that we have from our conditionings and from our society. So Reiki can strengthen us to do the tough work, to maybe have tough conversations about social justice, things we might not really want to talk about. I think so Reiki can strengthen us. Similarly, teaching Reiki practice of any kind to people who are maybe falling through the cracks of society strengthens them without negating the depth of the suffering or saying, see, now that we're cool with Reiki, we don't have to change those societal forms of oppression, because of course we do. But while those are changing, and while so many good people are working to changing those, maybe we can also make life more comfortable for people who are on the receiving end of injustice. And again, I invite listeners, you can see that it's a struggle, and I invite you into that in any way that's comfortable for you. maybe I'll hear from you. This is ongoing. I'm not the answer person on this one.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, but it's beautiful work that you're doing. And you also, you put together these Reiki workshops and other community outreach events to get out to all sorts of different communities. And, so we want to hear about that and how you have colleagues that you're working with that you bring in with you. Talk a little bit about that and how that all gets put together.
Yeah, so actually this started with a colleague who I hope you're listening, named Judy Boskin. One day we brainstormed and we created something that we nicknamed Reiki Outreach Organization, ROO, R-O-O. And we began literally reaching out kind of cold to some senior centers. And we would begin with the social worker, and if the social worker had heard of Reiki, certainly it was helpful. If the social worker was open to Reiki, super great. We would set up a time to do a Reiki, you call it, outreach presentation. Most of these were small group presentations, and so they were very informal, kind of going around, so what have you heard about Reiki? Do you have any background in Reiki? What questions might you have? And as we went around the room hearing from the participants, we would add value. So if somebody said something like, my daughter was they were elders, or my daughter or my spouse was in a hospital and had a Reiki volunteer come in and it really was helpful, then that's our chance to add value and say, yes, did you know that Reiki is provided in many hospitals, either by volunteers or Reiki trained nurses and other staff members. And, maybe you wonder why Reiki is invited in. Well, it's very gentle, it's non-invasive, and it helps. It's like a third arm of a nurse. So as people go around and share their experiences with Reiki, we kind of add value. So in a small group, it's not kind of a PowerPoint presentation. So we did this, and at the first place we went, they chose to have a monthly Reiki clinic. We came in with two tables, and we would each see 5 people for about half an hour treatments, 20, 25, 30 minutes. And that persisted for about a year and a half. And then it kind of petered out for a while because massage therapy came in at the same time. And I think that's the way this can go sometimes, to be revisited in the future. So, and then we brought it to a couple of other senior centers who maybe wanted different things. And actually, I'll be honest with you, it didn't always persist, partly because we need the staff of the center to make the appointments and remind people of their appointments. So there are these logistical factors. I mean, this is the real world, and people have to be accountable. And sometimes it works beautifully and seamlessly, and sometimes a little less so. So I'm just being honest. So if any of you are going to be doing outreach, do know that your best efforts may pay off beautifully, and even those same best efforts, maybe not so much this time around. But I would keep it going. This is something we have to share. So that particular senior center really liked the monthly Reiki clinic for quite a while. Others have wanted, like I alluded to earlier in the discussion, more of a workshop, teaching some basic meditations they can do for themselves. And I always encourage people to place their hands on themselves. I think there's something to that beyond being, trained in Reiki, which is we get hurt, we tend to automatically, put our hands on ourselves. I think there might be something built into humanity. So go ahead and do it. It's very calming. It's kind of like a little bit of biofeedback you get within your own self. I don't think we have to require that people who are facing cancer you have to sit through a 10 or 12 hour Reiki certification class. So go ahead and do the HAR breathing. Go ahead and place the hands, a place that was the psychosocial services for people with cancer. A recent place I'm at is a elder service health plan in Mattapan. It's a part of Boston. And I just kind of ad-libbed into the precepts there, and that worked out very well. So I would, should we say, recite, say the precepts in English and give people a chance to see, so just for today, do not live in anger. When are they most angry? And what maybe inquiry can they do into themselves, self-exploration? And remember, these are elders. They were definitely in their 80s. They have a lot of experience on life. This was not difficult for them. Mm-hmm. This was actually kind of easy for them. Mm-hmm. One of the greatest things, the experience of age, they get it. Mm-hmm. They get it immediately. It's fabulous. Mm-hmm. So I went through the precepts that way, and Hara breathing. And then I went around and did maybe 5-6 minutes of just hands on the shoulders, little sample Reiki session. And to a person, they were feeling different than when we started. And these were people with the walker, with the wheelchair, experiencing losses of their own self, losses of people they know. It mattered a lot to them to have this moment to reset themselves.
That's beautiful.
It's well, you know what a tribute to them. Right. That's, don't you experience this, Steve, if people, whether they're sitting in a chair, in a hospital room, in a wheelchair, on a Reiki table, they are the ones opening themselves. That's why every session is a tribute to the recipient. We're not healers in the spotlight. We are, helping people untangle their knots in their own way. Yeah. This is the knots in here. Most often it's the confused mind, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's really a process of helping them see a way to start to unravel the knots and untangle the knots. Yeah. So that's why it's always a tribute to them. And I see it in the outreach.
Yeah. And now you're also working with some hospitals in the area, right?
So, yes, in a couple of capacities, really, some in the past. Early on, so there's a hospital in Boston called Brigham and Women's Hospital, and I was involved in their pilot program for Reiki Volunteer Program, which is now a flourishing program of Reiki volunteers, and it's really become part, I believe, from what I understand and witness myself, of, you might say, the organizational culture of the hospital. So that was super exciting to see. And other area hospitals have Reiki volunteer programs where volunteers from the outside who are Reiki trained get a little more training, for hospital-wide training, and plus training in how to be the best they can be in a hospital setting. Mm-hmm. And so they take Reiki volunteers from outside, and some are also training their staff who then become Reiki volunteers outside of their job. So they might stay late or come early and offer Reiki to patients. Mm. And so now I'm in the blessed situation of being able to train staff at one of the area hospitals, Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. And this might be physicians, nurses, physical therapists, speech and language pathologists, phlebotomists, CNAs, patient navigators, it really doesn't matter, because what they want to do is care for themselves, their families with Reiki, and then be able to volunteer at the hospital they work at. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And more than just providing maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes of a Reiki session in the hospital, they can strengthen themselves, because a hospital environment, as everyone knows, can be more than fast-paced, kind of frantic, frenetic, stir up a lot of feelings. Mm-hmm. Physician and healthcare provider burnout is a well-known phenomenon. So by getting trained for themselves, they change a little bit of their interior landscape and then bring that changed landscape out to patients, to coworkers, and that's a gift to the whole organization, really, in the end, isn't it?
Absolutely. Now, how did the conversation with Deaconess start? How did you get in there?
I would say love and trust on both parts. Mm-hmm. The Reiki volunteer coordinator was open to my way of training and my way of practice, and said, let's do this. Okay. And then there's a VA hospital in Massachusetts that has also been working really hard to get their staff trained in Reiki, and I was able to train some nurses a few years ago. And things are, it takes time sometimes to get things going and more widely accepted in an organization, a hospital. And now the VA has a whole health initiative, and in this particular VA and others in the area, Reiki managed to be part of that initiative. And so it looks like, and I'm hopeful, and I've had conversations and meetings there, that I will be able to continue to train more of their staff up at that VA hospital, which is really a blessing also. Yeah, because if one person can train many, that's the best.
Right. And and then so you're training staff in the hospital, and then they also have a volunteer staff that gives Reiki.
Yeah, some hospitals do, some hospitals don't. I don't think the VA has that at this time. Mm-hmm. That Israel Deaconess has both. Okay. They have both going.
Okay, great.
So I think it's, hospitals have their own culture and their own way. They have their own way, and it's all wonderful if the patients benefit, if the coworkers benefit, if the organizational culture benefits. It's all good. It's all good way. And it's just exciting. It's just incredibly exciting. Yeah. I will tell an interesting experience. Sometimes I'll do Reiki pre-op and post-op, like many people. And I had a situation where a little pre-op procedure was going to have to be done. It's common. And the patient was getting maybe a little more anxious. And I had to step out because of this procedure, And actually the physicians that were going to do this procedure, the nurses, the pre-op folks, they came behind the curtain where I was waiting out there, and they said, actually, could you come in? So instead of just like shooting her with some kind of anti-anxiety medication, they allowed me to come in and just see if a kind of a non-medical solution might help. And they actually stepped out of the way. And so that says that hearts and minds are changing in terms of what is possible. Like, what is possible? So what is possible is that somebody can help another person calm and settle themselves without medication, with this Reiki loving touch, this compassionate touch. And it was effective, and there's a lot of gratitude all around in a situation like that, to just settle the physical, the emotional being of a person. They really settle, just to make a funny story here. Not a funny story. When I do some of the outreach, I bring this prop, and I think it is a nice analogy. So does everyone recognize this? And it's also Boston, it says. It's a snow globe this way.
Yeah, right in front of you.
So, okay. This is a snow globe. So when we shake a snow globe, we think, oh, it's so pretty, right? It's so pretty. All those particles, I don't know how well the viewers can see it. Yeah. But in fact, isn't it obstructing my view of the scene? But when all those particles settle and settle and settle, looky, I can see everything clearly, right? So that's like us, right? This is exactly my spiel of mine in outreach, right? So we can be like those particles, right? And our physical and emotional, any hyper arousal can kind of down regulate. We can settle and settle into the hara. And we're more able to manage what is to come. Yeah. So this is my little go-to prop. I recommend everybody get one of these.
Go out and get a snow globe.
Go out and get a snow globe.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about Celebration of Reiki.
Great.
Was an idea you had about, 8 years ago? How did that all come about?
Yeah, I think it was 8 years ago. So I hope there are some of the people listening today who gathered in my living room with monthly, what we called Reiki Practitioner gatherings. We might have had a better name. Reiki information sharing gatherings, it might have been. And we met once a month. We had a topic to discuss each time. So maybe one day it would be physical healing of the self and your own direct experience, or physical healing with others and how that is with any volunteer or family or professional practice. And so on. We had these topics. So we're doing this for a while, and someone said after, it was probably over a year of these meetings, this is so useful. Maybe we should have some kind of a conference. And I'm like, ha, that's so funny. But the thought came up again, and I said, if you will help, let's do this. So we continued to meet monthly, those that wanted to, and we became the first kind of planning committee, and we organized a conference. We didn't know what we were doing, but we did it. We had each other. That's all we needed was each other. We had the support of our Reiki practice, and we created an actual conference. And I think me, as like kind of the academic professorial type, it was, modeled that way, not at like a health expo or anything like that. And we had speakers, we had topics, we had speakers, and we expected maybe 50 or 75 people. And we had well over 125 people. Wow. And I'd like to talk about that first year because of the timing. So we have our annual conference. We're coming on to the 6th one. Now the last Sunday in April. And that so happens to usually be, or the next to last Sunday in April, the week after the Boston Marathon. So our first conference coincided with the Boston Marathon bombing. That it was the week before, and it so happens that the conference were offered a wonderful deal on some space, and it was in the town of Watertown, Massachusetts, which is where the bombers, I don't like to use that term, were hiding. I don't know how many people around the country are aware of this. So we couldn't go into Watertown. It was like everything was locked down. So we had to actually move the date of the very first conference to the following weekend. And do you know that almost every presenter and panelist could make it?
Wow.
The venue could make it.
Wow.
Almost everybody who signed up could make it. Some couldn't, alas. And some people that couldn't have made it the first time could make it on the second date. And we brought ourselves together in peace, in harmony, in wisdom and compassion. And it was even extra meaningful, although it was touching, moving, and everyone was still a little bit in shock in our area. So we realized after that first conference that people are really, really, really wanting professional development, learning, ongoing Reiki learning, what more is possible here. And so we said, let's start planning the second conference. And we had to get a bigger venue, and we planned our second conference. And somewhere in the middle of that time, we realized we are actually building something here. We're actually building something here. And we need to maybe become like a legal entity. We have to be somebody, So it was decided to become a nonprofit organization, and really none of us had any skills on how to do that. So it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We did it. We became a nonprofit organization. And that meant we had now a board which would help us grow, expand, vision things in a different way, help us with business, marketing, and these sorts of things that maybe not all Reiki practitioners are equally strong with. Some are, of course. So this led to even greater growth. And in addition to the annual conference, which is a 1-day conference, we added a annual symposium. And the annual symposium is more about core competencies for Reiki practitioners. For example, 2 years ago, it was trauma-informed Reiki care. This past year, it was caring for individuals with chronic health conditions. In November, we're envisioning, we don't have a title quite, we're working with this, but kind of what we need to know about the basics of mental health and mental wellness to really have that core competency to support clients, family. Yeah.
Can you talk a little more in depth about the trauma-informed for our audience, for myself? What exactly does trauma-informed mean, and how do you go about facilitating, informing people about trauma?
Yes, I'd love you to know, I'd like your listeners to know that actually the PowerPoints are still on the website, the Celebration of Reiki website, if they want to delve further. There are some amazing people out there doing this kind of work. So a couple of things. You first said, what is trauma or something?
What does trauma-informed mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That means we have at least a tiny beginning initial understanding that people who have had traumatic experiences in their distant past or recent past, their nervous system is like they feel like they're under threat quite a bit. And people out there will say, wow, this is like the biggest layperson's version. Yeah, it is a layperson's version of this. So if you're professionals out there, again, please weigh in, and I'm always open to learn and explaining things better. I feel like I might not be the ideal person for this. But what I learned was that, yes, a Reiki session can down-regulate the nervous system, but a Reiki session might not be touch in a Reiki session might not be right for everybody.
Right.
Maybe someone just needs an hour of you with your hands on their shoulders, that you might not be looking at all those hand placements. I'm feeling, to be honest with you, like I'm struggling with the question, Stephen.
No, you're doing fine.
Okay.
I think it's important because
we learned a little bit about the physiology of the nervous system and that people feel they're under threat.
Yeah.
If you feel you're under threat, even a Reiki session can be threatening.
Right.
Yes. Also, a Reiki session could allow to surface trauma held deep within the body that might be ready to be seen. And are we equipped to handle and be with in true loving care somebody who's now going through that? And without our Reiki practice and being solid and stable, we're not ready. So part of being trauma informed is being solid in your practice so that you're bringing your most calm, stable self. And I think a good word that I like and I teach is compassionate detachment. To be drawn into the drama is not helpful. Yeah. To be callous is not helpful. So this kind of compassionate detachment. Also understanding the physiology of the nervous system I find really helpful. So I did my best with that.
Yeah.
Today, Steve, for you listeners.
Yeah, and these are things that are taught at the Celebration of Reiki. So who attends the Celebration of Reiki?
Well, I can say that next Sunday at the 6th Annual Celebration of Reiki Conference, nearly 250 Reiki practitioners are already signed up. Okay. Who are they? They're you and me.
Yeah.
They're your listeners. They're mostly Reiki trained individuals. But there are some that are not Reiki trained, that are curious, and I know they're there, and that's perfectly fine. Most of them are Reiki trained individuals. They might have been trained last month. They may have been trained 30 years ago. They may be feeling that their Reiki level 1 training is a complete system in its own self, or they may have felt moved to experience level 2 and level 3. They may or may not be Reiki teachers. They may be professionals with professional Reiki practice, teaching and practice. They may be practicing with their households. We had a panel last year, Reiki with the family. And it was a panel of people who brought their direct experiences of practicing Reiki ongoing with their own family members. It was very enriching, very brilliant. Our panelists are brilliant, and guess who they are? They're you and me. They're you and me and your listeners. Yes, we do have a keynote speakers that are, this year we have Frank Arjava Petter coming in. Last year it was Franz Stina. So we have nice keynote speakers, and we also want to highlight non-international, but local and regional or national Reiki practitioners. Yeah. Okay. So want to hear some of the lineup for next Sunday?
Absolutely, please.
Yeah. So, of course, Arjava is the keynote speaking about the origins of Reiki. And then we have Ellen Albertson from Vermont, and she is going to talk about mindful self-compassion and the 5th Reiki precept. Linda Marks, a local person, is going to talk about embodying mind-body leadership. If you're going to do outreach, like it or not, you're in a situation of leadership. And leadership, traditionally can be defined in a very authoritarian or authoritative way, but there's a kind of a mind-body leadership. How do we embody that? So people have signed up for that. Following these are 3 concurrent simultaneous sessions I'm talking about right now. The third one at that time slot is a panel. Again, people like you and me talking about their direct experience of Reiki, self-development, and personal growth. Then we have lunch.
Lovely.
Yeah. And during lunch, right after lunch, someone is going to be talking about the Conversation Project, which is an end-of-life conversation, and bring the Conversation Project to our people. And those that aren't really interested in that, they can see a wonderful Japanese calligrapher do a demo, Michiko. Yeah, she will be with us all day long. And somebody may choose to have, right after lunch is kind of another kind of a break, Qigong and meditation with my colleague David Scholemson, who's a wonderful Reiki practitioner and meditation teacher. And then there's 3 simultaneous sessions in the afternoon. Reiki for improving patient care and patient outcomes in medical settings. I have a panel of nurses, social workers, physicians. Did I leave anyone out? Hope not. A panel called Reiki Care at the End of Life, and a panel that I'm really excited about, Reiki Serves the Community. So these are people that have gone out serving the community in some kind of outreach or community Reiki, community level Reiki practice. Yeah, that's our day.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
How long are the sessions? How long are the talks and the panels?
About an hour and a half.
That's great.
I think they're exactly an hour and a half, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. And so with the panel, are they each taking turns talking, or are they just answering random questions? I'm glad you asked, because I have to give incredible credit, I hope you're listening, to moderators of our panels and the panelists. If any of you are listening, kudos, unbelievable. It's highly coordinated and choreographed. It's beautifully done. The panelists have the questions ahead of time. Each one decides which they want to really lead out on, and then the other ones weigh in on. So it's all choreographed and coordinated for the utmost comfort of the panelists, who may not have ease with just speaking in front of, 80 people. Or 250.
But if it's divided by 3.
Right.
So maybe their session has 110, another one has 95, one has 85. I don't know, make that equal 250. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are simultaneous. People sign up for their first, second, third choices. Yeah, thanks for letting me kind of talk about the conference. I could talk more. We have a handful of vendors who are wonderful. Yeah. Add some spice to the day. Sell books, sell music, Japanese calligraphy, beautiful artwork that you might want to have in your practice space. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Now, Celebration of Reiki Inc. is a 501c3 educational organization. And so now I take it, is this the big event or one event a year for Celebration?
So our annual conference is really the biggest event we have. Then the symposium, everyone's in the same room for one topic. That's that core competency one that happens in early November. And then in between, during the year, we sprinkle other events. Some of them are fundraisers, for example, for the scholarship fund for the conference. And these are fun fundraisers. Last year we had, was that last year? Yeah. Sorry.
You're fine.
A drumming circle facilitated by a really effective individual. Yeah. Had the most fun. So fun. Well, we also offer, this is a lot serious, what was called QPR, suicide prevention training. This is a great little training. Think of it like CPR, in the sense that it's for everybody, that it's something that you can hold until maybe further help is needed. So, for example, if we are in a situation as Reiki practitioners where somebody expresses suicidal, they express that they are considering suicide, that they might be thinking of killing themselves. What are we supposed to do? Well, this training helps us because this is going to happen. If it hasn't already happened, it's going to happen in someone's Reiki practice. It's going to happen with their most loved ones. There is no one unaffected, and it's painful for everybody. But again, if we are kind of on the front lines of witnessing and being witnesses to suffering, we need to be informed. Right. And we need specialists to help us. So we need to be trained. So we feel that if I feel I need to be trained, then that makes me feel this is something the Celebration of Reiki can offer. So we've done that twice, and I think we'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
Maybe every other year.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So this is the big, basically moneymaker for Celebration of Reiki. I know you probably Celebration of Reiki probably takes donations as well. And
we really would love donations and sponsorships, yes, because we do feel like we're constantly relying on the same pool of Reiki practitioners to pay their tickets to the events. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then the event itself is pretty much self-sustaining and looking to grow it kind of financially, so you're able to do more outreach and grow the conference and things like that?
Yes, and it's been wonderful to see how people that come to the conference one year, they're telling their friends. Reiki teachers are telling their students. And that's a very organic and natural way for our community to grow. There is something, the Vermont Reiki Association, our sisters and brothers to just the north of us in Vermont. And here we are, although we are in Massachusetts, we're not the Massachusetts Reiki Association, but we definitely have give and take, Vermont to Massachusetts, and open to all of this kind of collaboration and sharing. This is very exciting when that happens.
Well, I want to ask you real quick about Frank, or Java Petter. Have you met him before?
I was lucky enough to actually sit next to him at a panel at the Vermont Reiki Association last year and hear him speak on the origins of Reiki.
Wow.
So that's I met him last year, and I know that people that are listening have been trained by him or by one of his Shihan Kaku you're out there and you already know him.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. So then you approached him to be the keynote speaker, or did you ask him last year when you saw him at the Vermont Reiki Association?
It was a thought in the mind of our planning committee before then. Yep.
Very nice.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, that's great.
Yeah, it's so exciting.
Yeah. So, it's just a few days, a little bit of time before it starts. What are the final things that have to come together to make this thing fly?
They are seamlessly together. It's all done.
All the Reiki angels brought it all together.
So much so. And any of you that are out there that are been doing the work or are volunteering the day of, what can I say? There is no alone. Nothing ever happens alone. We might think that is true, but the clothes I'm wearing, the clothes you're wearing, we are in relationship to the cotton plant, as I always tell my level 1 students, right? We're a relationship with the cotton farmer. And if there's exploitative conditions with the cotton farmer, we have to be in relationship to that too. So nothing is alone, and the Celebration of Reiki is one of those things. It relies on everybody, big and small. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
It's joyous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure, Elise. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Stephen. You are so much fun.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll be back next Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific, with another episode of Reiki Currents. I appreciate you. Namaste.